Hi, I'm Niall Williams. I'm a PhD student at the University of Maryland, College Park, and I'll be talking about quantifying environment compatibility for natural walking in virtual reality. In VR locomotion, it's usually preferred that the user can explore the virtual world using natural walking. But this is not always feasible since some paths in the virtual world may correspond to paths in the physical world that are blocked by obstacles. This notion that some paths are valid while others are not leads us to ask how much natural locomotion is possible for a pair of environments. It may be the case that for a particular use case of VR, the amount of natural walking possible in the given physical space may be sufficient. However, answering this question is difficult because it requires conducting user studies to collect lots of data for each environment that we care about. I'll try to illustrate that here with an example. Consider this physical world on the left and the virtual world on the right. If the user wants to walk straight forward in VR, they can't do so because there's a fireplace in the way. However, if they want to walk forward and then take a right turn, they're able to do so because the physical space allows for it. Answering the question of how much natural locomotion is possible basically boils down to doing this path evaluation for every possible path across all combinations of starting positions in both the physical and virtual spaces. This is computationally intractable, but we can estimate it using the idea of environment navigability. We define environment navigability as the average distance walked before colliding with an obstacle. Wide open spaces will have high navigability, while cluttered spaces will have low navigability. Our work makes its contribution by showing how to estimate navigability for a pair of physical and virtual environments using only the layouts of the environments. Here is a high-level overview of our algorithm. First, we quantify the features of the environment that are important for collision-free navigation. Then, we compare the salient features between the physical and virtual spaces. The idea here is that we want to measure the similarity between the layouts of the physical and virtual spaces, since collisions in VR arise when the layouts of the two environments do not match. First, we get some input geometry for the two environments. This is basically just a floor plan. Then we sample points uniformly across both environments. For each environment, we compute the visibility polygon at each point, since the visibility polygon is a nice way to represent the local structure around a point in an environment. This gives us two lists of polygons, where each polygon is a unique representation of the environment, assuming we sampled enough points. Our goal is now to measure the similarity between these two lists of polygons in order to measure the similarity between the environments. So, given the list of polygons, we want to compare each polygon from one list with each polygon from the other list to find the best match between the two. This will represent the best case match between the two locations in the physical and virtual spaces. I'll walk through an example of how this computation is done. We pick a physical polygon shown in blue, and we compare it with a virtual polygon shown in red. We want to measure how much of the virtual space cannot be accessed using natural walking from the user's current physical location. This is actually given by the regions of the red polygon that do not overlap with the blue polygon, which we highlight here in gold. The area of this gold-shaded region is the measure of incompatibility between the two locations. We compute this for all pairs of polygons and we pick the minimum area as the best match between the polygons. This gives us a list of real numbers, which is our incompatibility score. Note that larger values mean less navigability. Interpreting a list of hundreds of numbers is difficult, so we can make the interpretation process easier using visualizations. If we plot the sampled points and color them according to their incompatibility scores, we can see that regions with more open space in the virtual environment score worse on the navigability scale, while regions with more objects score better. This agrees with what we know from intuition, which is that larger open virtual spaces are harder to navigate due to constraints in the physical world. We can also make this visualization interactive, which lets us specify which points we care about and lets us see exactly where they map to in the physical space. In this example, we see that the horizontal hallways in the virtual space have worse navigability scores since none of the physical hallways are long enough, and that the vertical hallways score much better in terms of navigability because they match the size of the physical hallways. We also did validations of our metric to make sure that the metric does have some correlation to navigability and to confirm that we aren't just imagining things. We collected locomotion data from user studies and simulations in 15 different environment pairs, and the general trend that we saw was that as the environment incompatibility increased, the navigability decreased. We didn't see this trend for every pair of environments, but it was the case for the majority of them. More results can be found in the paper. Although our metric appears to be useful for estimating navigability, there are some limitations. First, the computation can be slow depending on the number of points sampled. In our tests, computation took around 2 to 6 minutes for each environment pair. Our metric also only considers the best case mapping between the physical and virtual spaces, which may not always be useful depending on the paths that are traveled. We also only consider the layouts of environments when doing our computation, but it's known that other factors also contribute to human navigation. Finally, more data would always be helpful. Hopefully, with this talk, I was able to show you why navigability is important to consider for VR and why it is difficult to quantify precisely. In this work, we showed that comparing the similarity of the physical and virtual environments can be a useful way to estimate the navigability of environments. We also showed that the accurate estimates of navigability can help in the design of better virtual experiences. Future work should also look into parallelization, trying different similarity metrics, incorporating more factors into the computation, and large-scale data collection. I hope you found this work and our talk interesting. If you would like to learn more, you can check out the paper and the code at these links online, and you can also contact me with any questions at this email address here.